Hello, welcome back to this series of videos on research methods and understanding your field and genres of writing. It's a lot of stuff, I know. In this video, I want to talk about rhetorical support and research approaches. So research approaches refers to things like qualitative research, quantitative research that I've talked about in my previous videos. Now, rhetorical support, rhetoric is used in two different ways. In kind of general common English, it's often used to refer to insincere or untruthful speech, like by politicians and advertisers and such, which is a kind of a negative term, which comes from the original use, which is still used. The original meaning of rhetoric is still used in academic circles, in the academic world, like in teaching, writing, teaching in English departments, for example. Rhetoric is actually an area of study that goes back to ancient times when ancient scholars in Roman and Greek cultures taught senators and other public figures how to express themselves and how to persuade audiences, whether in speaking or writing. So some of the brightest minds, for example, in ancient Greece and Rome, were masters of rhetoric who trained senators and politicians and other public figures how to persuade other people, like how to persuade other people in the Roman Senate to your views. So rhetoric refers to persuasive writing or speaking. Rhetoric, rhetorical. And that's relevant because academic writing is persuasive in some way at some level, albeit in a more objective sense. So, for example, you're trying to persuade people that my interpretation of this novel is a valid one. Not that it's the one correct one, but that it is a valid one, a sensible one that helps us to understand something more about the novel or the author, or helps us to understand it from a different angle. Or you're doing a science experiment and you're trying to persuade people, I've proven a hypothesis, or I've disproven this hypothesis, or this experiment supports, this theory or this hypothesis. Or you're trying to persuade people that I did something cool, I found something cool, this is a new discovery and it's cool, it's worthwhile, it's valuable, it's useful. And so a lot of research is rhetorical or persuasive in some sense like that. So we talked about different research methods. That in turn affects the kinds of rhetorical support you're going to have within the body paragraphs. So you're writing a paper in college or graduate school, and you've got your main thesis, the main point of your paper, and then supporting your thesis, you've got the main ideas that correspond to different body paragraphs in the paper. And those body paragraphs have claims or topic sentences. Probably each paragraph or each section is going to have a topic sentence, which is a claim that you need. It's an idea or an argument that you need to support. And it could be a persuasive idea itself, like, this law was bad, or it's something that's supporting your thesis, like the statistical results showed that there was a real difference between these two groups, which supports your thesis that I've proven a hypothesis, or I've got support for a hypothesis. So rhetorical support, it's important to be aware of what kind of support will be in the body paragraphs, which will be greatly shaped or directly correspond to the research method that you're using. And sometimes these will be identical with the particular research method that you're using, a particular type of qualitative or quantitative research that you're using. So let's talk about some. If you're doing a qualitative paper, it's kind of empirical. You're maybe observing a group of people or doing interviews or collecting some kind of data that you're interpreting kind of in a holistic way. You're not doing statistical analysis, but you're using maybe a theory to interpret things. And so the data and the support in the body paragraph are maybe one of these types. Let's say, for example, you're doing ethnographic research. So again, ethnographic means observing people and making inferences about what they're doing and why. And it could be, say, a language learning study by observing a classroom of students and how they interact with each other and how they interact with the teacher, or how they try to use, how they're learning a language and how they try to practice and use this new grammar form in sentences and the mistakes that they make. So those could be, it could be more focus on, say, understanding the education or the social dynamics or the language learning of these students, depending on the study. So ethnographic data. So you're doing observational data. This is observational data. This is ethnographic data. So some of your body paragraphs, the support is going to consist of reports about what you observed, what they did, what they said, how they said things. That's sort of ethnographic data. Or you can record people having a natural conversation. Let's say you're doing what's called conversation analysis. Conversation analysis is a type of applied linguistics research. You record a normal, natural conversation between two people, and you make a very careful transcription of all that they said and exactly how they said things in order to infer things about the structures in their communication, the conversational dialogue, their interchange, or the types of words and phrases they use and why they use those phrases, their goals and how they communicate their goals. Okay, so those are different types of ethnographic data. So your body paragraphs will be basically summarizing observational data. So that's ethnographic data, different kinds of ethnographic data. In a qualitative paper, you might also do open-ended interviews. Open-ended interviews, let's say you ask the teachers what they thought about the lesson, you ask the students what they thought about the lesson, you ask the students about their learning difficulties, or you ask the teachers of the students about their beliefs about certain things, whatever. Open-ended interview data. You could also have descriptive numerical data, or sort of statistical data, but it's descriptive statistics. So descriptive statistics would be things like counts and frequencies, how many or how often or how many times something happens, or how many students who did this versus how many did that, percentages, ratios. So very simple descriptive statistics. They merely describe things. Now that could be in a lot of different kinds of papers, but especially in qualitative research, qualitative papers. If it's a quantitative paper, it might report that, but then go on to use more powerful statistical methods to then say, is something really going on here? But in a qualitative paper or some other kinds of papers, maybe more of an evaluative program, evaluating a program, descriptive statistics might be types of support given. Or in political science papers, you might have descriptive data like this about a country or about a government program and whether it's successful or not. That's descriptive data. A case study could be another type of qualitative support. So it's a research method itself, type of qualitative research method, and so then the data are going to be a case study. So a case study, for example, in a qualitative study, maybe you do careful observations of one or two or three, let's say, students who are learning something, learning a language. It could be individual people, and you have a detailed description of what they're doing, what they're going through, maybe also some interview data with them too. So it's a case study. You could also do a case study of a business, a company, business research, where you look at the history of a company and why it failed, why it succeeded. So case study data. Sometimes you might have historical evidence, of course, in history research, but also, let's say, linguistic research about the history of a language and how the language changed. You're going to have historical data from like old documents, ancient documents of the language to document historical changes. You could have different kinds of historical data if you're doing history research, historical documents, and historical records and such. Those are different kinds of qualitative data, generally. There are other kinds of qualitative data, if you can If you want to, you can probably take a course in qualitative research methods and find out more about qualitative research and research methods if that's something that you like. Quantitative research, on the other hand, is going to be somewhat different. If you have statistical data, it's not going to end at the descriptive statistics. You're going to probably do inferential statistics. You have detailed statistical data from, let's say, 2 groups that you did your experiment on, and you do powerful statistical analysis using t-tests, ANOVAs, correlation, regression, etc. You may not know what those are. Don't worry, it doesn't matter. In order to see, is something really happening? Are these 2 groups different? If I teach one group this way and I teach another group this way, is there any real difference in their learning and their performance and their outcomes? Or a drug trial. Does this drug really work? You have a test group or a control group and an experimental test group that gets the real drug. Is there any real difference that says this drug actually works and makes them better? So comparing different groups using statistical analysis. All kinds of experimental data are possible. All kinds of experiments are possible, whether it's in a psychology research lab or a drug test, drug trials, classroom experiments, or survey data where you can convert the data to numbers for statistical comparisons. Survey questions like, rate this on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you agree or disagree? How many years have you studied this, or whatever? Things that can be converted to numbers or scales and then compared statistically. So quantitative research, quantitative survey data. Again, there are a number of other kinds of quantitative research methods and support out there, but that's going to be your rhetorical support. So the body paragraphs are going to contain information about the descriptive and inferential statistics, or the results of your comparisons, and then discussion of what that means. In theoretical research, things are more loosely structured. It's not really empirical so much. And so the support in your different body paragraphs might be, for example, theoretical analysis and discussion, legal analysis and discussion, different kinds, logical inferences. So, for example, you compare 2 sentences in a theoretical linguistics paper. This is something that people could say in the language, and this is just not possible. People wouldn't say it. They would say it's not grammatical, or it's gibberish, it's nonsense. So this shows this about the abstract structure of the language, the abstract grammatical principles of the language. You use kind of limited data, often your own data that you pull out of your own head, and that might be okay, or from examples you've got from somewhere, but you're not really collecting a lot of empirical data. It's just your own self-supplied data, and you do comparisons to make inferences. So sort of inductive inferences, or deductive arguments. So philosophy, theoretical linguistics, and other theoretical fields might use this. Literature analysis is kind of theoretical as well as interpretive, using a literary theory to interpret things. So literary analysis has aspects of theoretical and interpretive research methods. Mathematical proofs or arguments. If you're doing theoretical math research, theoretical physics, those are theoretical arguments. So theoretical papers will have theoretical support based on logical inferences, inductive or deductive logical arguments, and such. Those are some kinds of support you'll find in different kinds of research papers from different kinds of fields, depending on whether the general research approach is qualitative or quantitative or something else. Let me say something more about quantitative and qualitative research. Experimental data is from a very carefully controlled experiment, like what you can do in a psychology lab, or if you've got like a collection of a bunch of written samples and you can run statistical analysis on the language patterns in, a collection of thousands of essays or writings by native speakers, for example, pure statistical analysis, very tightly controlled. Now, in language research, a lot of times you do classroom research where you can't really tightly control things. Let's say you want to test a new teaching method. Does this new teaching method for teaching this grammar form, let's say we're teaching definite articles, does it work better than the traditional way? So you have one classroom, the students are just randomly assigned, or it's an existing classroom because you got teachers who already have these classes and say, hey, can you teach this for me? They say, yeah. So in two classrooms here, the students are taught by the traditional method. Now, you can't control for factors like the students' backgrounds and what they already know very well. Maybe a little bit, but not fully. In this group of two classrooms, your teachers are teaching, let's say, definite articles using your new method that you've developed. And you give them tests at different times, and you do statistical comparison of the results. You can't fully control the factors like the students and their backgrounds. So this is called quasi-experimental research. So in full experimental research, you have full control over the important factors. Like in a research study you do in a psychology lab or in a drug trial, medical experiment. With classroom research, it's quasi-experimental because you don't have full control. Quasi means almost or partially. Quasi-experimental design. So you might be reading papers like that. So keep in mind, there might be some limitations to the study because they can't control for everything. So maybe the results are valid, but if the results somehow seem funny, you have to question whether, their groups were really normal in the study. Then you have mixed methods, which is interesting. That's where in one study you've got a data set, a set of data, and at this you do qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis in a study together. So maybe you have students, let's say, in a learning experiment, and you have some qualitative data from the students and, their evaluation of the course, as well as quantitative data from their course performance and their test results. And you analyze both of those. That's mixed methods. So qualitative and quantitative mixed methods together. And that's a type of research approach I didn't talk about. It's kind of a hybrid or blend of qualitative and quantitative. Now, I have not talked in detail about all the different types of qualitative and quantitative studies that can be done. I can't do that here. I have not talked in much detail about critical, evaluative, interpretive research or applied research. That's probably less common. Unless you're into a really specific area of research, you might not get into that. So I'm not really talking about that here, and I myself don't have much of a background in that. Now, when I say applied research, I'm not talking about applied linguistics necessarily, where applied linguistics is a huge field where people do qualitative research and people do quantitative research, and some people even do theoretical research in applied linguistics, But when I mean applied research methodology or approach, I'm talking about a very small area of research where people look at, say, empirical research about, let's say, learning and teaching, say, a particular language or grammar form. And then from that, you come up with methods, you propose methods for teaching that thing. So your paper is basically your original applications based on research, empirical research that you've read, empirical or theoretical research that you've read, and you come up with applications for that. Or looking at the scientific research about this type of new material, you write a paper about engineering applications, propose some engineering applications for this. That's applied research. That's what I mean here by applied research, as in applied research methods. That's different from applied linguistics or applied whatever. Okay. As you're learning academic writing in your field, think about the kinds of rhetorical support that make up the body paragraphs in your paper. And if you're a student in my class, if you're watching this as a student in this particular year, this is going to be relevant to assignments that I might be asking you to do in this unit. So, again, your brain is full. In the next video, I'm going to maybe walk through some examples of research questions or hypotheses and the kind of research that one might do, what type of research it is. So, take a break, let your brain kind of refresh, relax, come back to the next video. I'll see you then. Goodbye.